Welcome to Gold Derby's TV Sound Panel. I am Senior Editor Marcus James Dixon, and we are here with Paul Shubat, the re-recording mixer on Netflix's Cabinet of Curiosities. Paul, first of all, how amazing is it working with a living legend like Guillermo del Toro? Is that one of the big reasons you wanted to do this project?
Two-part question. Yeah, working with Guillermo is you're working alongside a master. I mean, his uh, way around uh, sound is pretty phenomenal. He can dissect hundreds of tracks that he's not aware of, and then be able to direct you as long as you pay attention, because he will rattle off very quickly a lot of things that need to happen for him to get to where he wants to be with the scene. So much of it is story driven. He's not afraid to eliminate and create depth sonically, and that's something that I learned from him. It's easy in some of the genre things for us to get to a wall where there's not enough dynamic, and his sense of theatrical as well. He brings so much of that knowledge of filmmaking to the table that you just, you get there, and then he can sort of take the wheel, and you execute his things, and then you sit back and we all look at each other in the theater and go, wow, we thought we nailed it to show him. And with this project, there were 8 different directors with 8 different composers. There were 8 basically small films, and all the directors are all feature film directors. So they bring an aesthetic and a demand for detail that we sometimes don't get in maybe episodic television and that sort of thing, because it is what it. There's time constraints. There's certain things like that where some of these feature filmmakers, it's kind of not over until they say it's kind of over, and so there was a bit of that. And then Guillermo, after they had sort of like a director's cut in picture, then Guillermo would come in with their executive team and review it, and then make the appropriate changes. That may even mean in the final playback, we're thinking that's the case. He may actually say, we're going to re-edit picture and reshoot, like things like that, so it was a very much, we had to be pretty agile on the stage. There was no kidding. And the directors that were a part of it were all over the world. Some one in Australia. It's so that we were dealing with time zones. It was a challenge in that regard, but incredibly satisfying. I mean, because you're not glued to even one vision. It's okay, we did that one, and they were all 8 were kind of in flux until the very end. And that, although it being a little bit nerve-wracking, it can also be incredibly exciting, because you're kind of working on 8 visions, and then it gets presented on Netflix as we will do. I think it was presented in 2 films a night over 4 nights. And upon seeing in that regard, it's a bit of a ride, because they're so different. Each story is quite different times, different things, different aesthetic.
And the episode you're submitting for the Emmy Awards is the same one you were nominated for at the Cinema Audio Society Awards, episode 3, The Autopsy, directed by David Pryor. And just from a broad perspective, what makes this episode stand out to you from the angle of the sound department?
There's a little bit of everything in it. There's the real world. There's very much practical stuff. So you have incredible sound team, me being re-recording mixer, the incredible sound team up front, Foley, ADR, the sound dogs that delivered. A part of our sound team was also in the UK, Bernard O'Reilly, Paul Gurman, some great talents that brought just great stuff. I have to give that shout out to them. And to your point, in Autopsy, the reason I say that is because there's kind of everything. It's real world in a period piece, and then it goes into somewhere else. It's kind of, so as from a sound perspective, it has kind of it all. You've got massive dynamic, but you also have very delicate real world things wrapped around some incredible score. And in that, by the end, you're into, it was more of an interesting monster. We're into the voice work that they had to do on Joe Allen was incredible. They recorded his ADR, the whole thing's ADR for him, and he's recorded at an extremely high rate, bitrate, so that it could be manipulated without any aliasing. A lot of science went into some of that stuff too, so that it wasn't just kind of the same thing. We're just going to pitch shift and we're going to do things that have been done, generally previously and effectively in many movies and television shows. But they were trying to, and David Pryor was really pushing that team to that. And as far as effects, you kind of have a bit of everything. You have Dottie by the end. No, sorry, that's a different film. I got myself mixed up there. So excuse me. That when we were on in the autopsy labs, there was so much delicate work and hand holding between sound design and score, where you can't really tell where one starts and the other one finishes. And then we get into Joe Allen, the monster, but there's explosions. There's high intensity stuff. And that's why I think we chose that one, because as far as a piece, it kind of displays a whole lot of discipline within filmmaking, and that's why we picked that one.
The autopsy scenes with F. Murray Abraham, the great F. Murray Abraham, they
Yes.
just feel so realistic and filled with so many slices and cuts and stitches. How do you go about making sure that all of those sounds were so authentic?
That was a lot of work, Foley particularly. We didn't just dive in with the sounds that were originally delivered. We, as Guillermo and David pursued, it needed to feel like it was authentic, but very much not authentic. That is frozen pigskin leather. His movement, the breaking of all his bones and things as he was that's all frozen real animal material and a vegetable. I think that Goro, Foley artist, described it as every day it looked like a bear ran through a salad bar and it exploded in the Foley stage. And he said, that's how you know it's a good track. Because it was so there was a lot of elements that went into that, and then a lot of manipulation of those elements to get it so that, like you say, it's tactile, it's close, but it's not just all swish, if you know what I mean. You can, a lot of movies in the genre, it turns into very just wet and squishy. That needed to have a solid nature. It needed to have a bit of that wetness. It needed to have all those things because the bodies were dead and frozen as well, but then they were reanimated with the alien. So we've got an alien story wrapped inside a period piece, inside of all this, inside of an autopsy room where there's two principal characters, with one slicing the other one itself up, and it's crazy stuff, but fascinatingly interesting.
And I love the moment where we go into his body and we hear all of the synapses firing and the electricity whirring.
Yeah.
Was that a bit of a challenge to get all of that, correct? I say correct as if I know what it sounds like for real.
For sure. And also really interesting in that, because there's, all of a sudden we go from real world. Now we're inside like I don't know, like an IMAX movie, going inside some kind of a thing where it's all around us. And of course we mixed in Atmos and everything. And if you ever have an opportunity to hear it in that form, it's pretty fantastic. We go completely 360, that you can actually, if you turn backwards to the other direction, back to the, you'll still feel like if the screen was there, it would still work. We're in the ceiling and everything. And it was just, as VFX came in, as they do with these things, our tracks evolved. And we just wanted to make sure that it, once again, was dynamic with the score, and that it worked as a full large piece, but then we go completely silent as you're traveling, and then it just goes and we fall off, and then it's just Abrams' voice in 360, more than 360 everywhere. Yeah, ceiling everywhere, and it all of a sudden you're kind of inside the head, and we just had to be careful to make sure that some of those details did get caught. And thank you for noticing.
Well, it's such a great episode, and I love a good anthology show, and this is one of the best ones on television. So thank you so much for talking with us today, Paul.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.